We would like to welcome you all to this Nova SBE webinar. My name is Susana Ferreira and I'm part of the Executive Education team here at Nova SBE. I'm hosting this webinar from my home, which I believe is the case for the majority of you. It is a well-known fact that we live in a VUCA world in which the exponential has become the new normal. This is going to demand from us a whole new paradigm, new strategies, new ways of thinking, new ways of working, and this is why Nova SBE has decided to dedicate a series of webinars to talk around these subjects. Today, we have the privilege of having with us Miguel Pina, who is a professor specialist in leadership and organizational behavior. If you should have any questions, we would like you to address these questions in the Q&A area in the screen. So without further ado, I leave you with Miguel to talk to you about this new exponential paradigm shift.
Hello, welcome to Nova. Today, not from the usual or from our beautiful campus in Carcavelos, but from our homes. I would like to share with you 5 notes on how to handle this crisis. I'll try to be brief so that we have some space for Q&A at the end. And I have organized my points in 5 possible lines of thought and action informed by a positive view of leadership. The first thing to take into account is that if we assume that leadership consists in guiding a group of people in the direction of the future, then this is the right moment to use this art. Every organization had plans and strategies, but suddenly the plans and strategies were simply outdated, which means that we need to have new strategies and we need to have them fast, which means that this is the time to improvise a new strategy and to improvise one quickly, at least for the short term. So the first thing that is probably important to have at this moment is a clear vision of the future we want. Again, the near future, and what the expectations are in terms of the vision for the team, the organization, for the next weeks or for the next couple of months. But it's not enough to have a strategy or a vision for the near future. It's also important to know how to get there. And in this sense, we not only need to revise the strategy, but also to take some steps to move in this direction as soon as possible and to create a sense of normality, which means that leaders at this moment need to be working in 2 parallel tracks, one in the present and one in the future, or directed towards the future. This is as leadership is normally, but in this new normal, as Susanna mentioned, the need to combine present and future actions is even more important. My second point is that this strategy for the future needs to be designed clearly and quickly, but it should also be positive. I think that it's possible to see a leader as a merchant in hope. And if we see leadership as a process of giving hope to a group of people, this is probably more necessary now than it was in the recent past. Of course, a crisis with this magnitude confuses us, breaks sense, and it's important for leaders to provide us with clear indications about possible lines of action into the future. The future should be positive, meaning that we should have an inspiring purpose. We should think about the organization we want to build after the crisis, and in this sense, the question is, how can we be able to build a hopeful vision in the midst of this scenario? But that's the meaning of positive leadership. Positive does not refer to the absence of negative, because positive and negative coexist and they are inevitable, both of them. The question is for leaders using the positive approach, how can we advance a positive or a hopeful vision even in the worst of moments? However, and because positive coexists with negative, it's not enough to define a positive vision. It's also important to see how this vision deals with the negativity of the present. So once again, the work of leaders is paradoxical in the sense that it requires us to be positive about the future without sugarcoating the difficulties of the present. Yet, the difficulties of the present should not be an obstacle to the construction of a positive future that should be built now. In other words, this is a good moment to explore opportunities, new ideas and innovations that we normally do not have time to follow in regular times. My third note has to do with the need to keep control. It's very common that in moments of difficulty, people will feel paralyzed by difficulties, by the lack of clarity about the future, and it can be tempting to think that the best thing to do now is to wait until we have more information, less uncertainty, less ambiguity. But the fact is that leadership consists in being in control, and in a sense, the message for those of you in leadership positions is to take control. So the question is, how can we take control? And I suppose that once again, the first thing to do is to self-control. It's very tempting at this stage to feel paralyzed, as I mentioned before, or to start doing a number of things simultaneously. Some of these things are maybe look urgent today, but they can send mixed messages. And in this sense, it's important to be in control without being hyperactive or making decisions that will confuse people, like cutting costs without trying to see how the future will probably imply some of the costs that were cut in this moment of crisis. So one of the attributes that people associate with good leadership, and this is very obvious in a number of projects we have conducted at Nova, has to do with the fact that good leaders transmit a sense of serenity. This is important on a regular basis because we all have small crises on a regular basis in our daily lives, but it's even more important now. So I think that one of the aspirations that people have at this moment is to be led by someone who is able to provide a team with a sense of calm and serenity. The provision of this sense is something that must be transmitted, even if people are not feeling that calm at this precise moment. But it's important to keep control by not losing self-control. My fourth note, after defining a goal for the future, defining a positive goal, and being in control, refers to the need to build a resilient team. We have all been familiarized with this concept of resilience in the recent past. We hear that we need to be resilient as individuals, as members of teams, as members of communities and organizations. And again, this is the reason why resilience is necessary. We need to be resilient because of crisis. As you can imagine, if there weren't crises, then there would be no need to be resilient. And the construction of resilience is an outcome of the maintenance of positive and supportive relationships during moments of crisis. Sometimes resilience can appear as a superpower, but the fact is that research indicates that resilience is, first of all, the outcome of having a positive and supportive network. So In these moments, and thanks to technologies such as the one we are using, it's possible to be with people, to keep our connections, and to try to create empathy with one another. So situations such as the COVID pandemic are the ones that test the resilience of a team. And I suppose that this is a great moment for leaders to tell people that they are with them, that they are available, and that they project the team as a more resilient team after the crisis. My final note, my final takeaway has to do with the need to prepare the future in the present. As you have probably noticed, some of the most impressive cases of organizations and nations in terms of dealing with the pandemic have been those of nations such as South Korea and Taiwan that have been able to react very promptly. The fact is that their response capacity was to a great extent the result of their preparation. So they were well prepared, and they had been able to respond fast because of preparedness. So considering that the world is global, that we face a number of challenges like climate change, geopolitical challenges, etc., I think that the message for today is also very clear. We should start preparing ourselves and our team and organization for the next crisis immediately, in the sense that we cannot anticipate the crisis, but it's possible to create scenarios to prepare the organization to make it more attentive to the challenges that will necessarily lie ahead of us in the future. So the cases of best responses were also not by coincidence the ones that were more prepared. So in summary, if we want to start thinking about preparing the organization for the future, we can, for example, first of all, identify the goal for the future, develop a positive vision. So it's having a goal is crucial. If it's a positive goal, even better. Being in control by not losing self-control, creating resilience when resilience is most necessary, and last but not the least, not wasting the opportunity to learn from a crisis. Again, we can possibly define leadership as the capacity to take a team of people into the future, and this is the moment to test this skill that is probably more necessary than it has been 1 month ago, 1 year ago, 10 years ago. So this is the moment that will make or break leaders, and I wish you all the best of luck. I think we have some time for questions in case there are some. Until now, there are no questions yet. And if you have your questions, please use the chat. If there are no questions, let me say that the School Nova will soon make a paper available with some of the ideas shared here, and we will elaborate more some of the possibilities for leaders to handle this pandemic.
Miguel, just a question. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Miguel? So I would like to pose you a question.
Yep.
Okay. So hope is the time to harvest, let's say. What can leaders do in this time? How can they prepare for how can they take advantage of this time and best prepare to the what lies beyond?
I think that thanks for the question, Susanna. I think that well, first of all, I think that one problem with everyday life in organizations is that we tend to work in the standard operating mode, meaning that we tend to repeat routines that are well established, that are efficient, etc. And sometimes we simply don't have the time or the attention span or space to introduce novelty. I think that if this crisis will be helpful, I suspect that it will be helpful because to a great extent, it will force us to reinvent the way we work. It will show that some practices that were established were inefficient, in a sense they are not necessary. A number of meetings that we attend in person probably can be done remotely because the technology is quite efficient. And in this sense, I think that the first message that we should share together collectively, especially the leaders, is that this is a great moment to create innovation. It's also a great moment to acid test our capacity of leadership, because leading is more than controlling people. Actually, it consists in delegating, empowering people. And now, nobody can command and control people in traditional ways, simply because we are not working together. I have been inquired in the recent past about the reason why telework is not as abundant as one could expect. And I think that this is the moment to engage with more teleworking, because as we have witnessed, in some cases, I think that we have probably worked more in the last 2 weeks than in the normal times before the crisis. So I think it's a great time to build innovation and to try solutions that were not tried before because they were not really urgent. More questions. What can universities do to help the business? It's a good question. I think that, well, this is one of the things we can do to share what we know from research, try to put people in contact and contribute with lessons that at least show that we are not alone in this in facing this challenge. I think that one of the reasons why people paralyze is because we feel that our challenge is different from the challenges that other people are facing, but I think this is valid for everybody. And universities are not different from other organizations. I think that one of the important outcomes of this crisis is that the point I was mentioning before, the fact that this is a great timing to test new experiences, to define new ways of working is also very important for us as a university, because there's this challenge of going online, trying blended methods of teaching, etc. And I'm sure that at the end of the crisis, we will be much stronger in terms of these technologies. And it was not only by choice. The choice was made. We already decided that we needed to test these ideas, but suddenly this combination of chance and strategy converged to force us to learn new things. As you know, the word crisis in some languages has a double meaning. It's something that is threatening, but something that is also promising in terms of forcing us to learn, to be self-critical, etc. And I think that the final point is that we should never waste the learnings that potentially come from a good crisis. Functions that cannot be done remotely. Well. I think that in some cases, because of the nature of work, you're right. Some functions cannot be done remotely, like I suppose in manufacturing. In some cases, people need to be there. In this case, the question is, what can we do to protect people as much as we can, and to create conditions for life to go home in the safer possible way. I think that at the moment nobody has an answer to this question. I'm sorry, but the question is, to what extent can some functions that we assume that could not be performed from a distance teach us to other cases? I presume that in some cases, like in manufacturing, for example, there's simply no way, in case of some jobs, to do them from a distance. But if you ask me something like a couple of months ago, if schools and universities could be operating as we are operating today, my answer honestly would be that I don't think so. So the question is, how can we discover for a number of jobs ways of keeping the organization alive, even if in this mode of learning? Again, I assume that in some cases it's not possible. Well, in this case, people probably have to be there with all the necessary precautions, but in some cases, I think that the system is proving to be more resilient than I expected, and I think that our case is a very it's an evident one. I started my online teaching this week, and again 1 month ago, I think that this would never happen as fast because it would simply be impossible. So the first question is to probably to think about our assumptions. So to what extent are our assumptions correct, and to what extent can some jobs actually be performed from a distance? And I think that was it. Thank you very much for being with us. I hope that some of these ideas provide some guidance and some energy. And again, I wish you all the best, and I hope that we see you soon, not necessarily online, but in Carcavelos. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Miguel. Like Miguel said, I hope you will join us to continue this series of webinars in the next few weeks. So thank you all, and stay safe.